Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the B2B podcast. I'm your host, Brian Muller. I got my co host here, Brian Thorne. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm excited to see the other man on the screen, Mr.
Yes,
Doyon.
we have a special guest with us here, Matt Doyon. Matt, how are you?
Doing great.
Fantastic. Just for a quick intro on Matt, Matt is also a former HubSpotter who's in sales at HubSpot, went over to Rock Content where he was head of sales, I believe CRO, now is the CEO and founder at Triple Session, where Matt, I'll actually let you do a little explanation of what Triple Session is and what you're doing now. But great to have you on.
Great to be here. Triple Session is an integrated conversation AI and learning and development tool. So we take all the best elements of learning from a call, stick it into a coaching plan using AI, and feed it into a library of training material to help keep feedback loops really tight and salespeople improving on a regular basis.
Which is perfect and ties into the topic of our podcast today, talking about practice. Well, Al and I just talk about practice and really just enabling sales reps to get better, right? And creating this environment of training, practice, enablement, and making sure we can help organizations scale, increase productivity per rep, really grow individuals that we have on our sales team. So ties in nicely. I also forgot to mention in your intro, you're the author of The Revenue Revolution, which I got right here. Absolutely fantastic book. So if you're listening, go pick up The Revenue Revolution on Amazon. So where they get it, Amazon, Audible,
Amazon or wherever your book vendor of choice resides. Yeah, buy it in triplicate.
triplicate. I love it. Well, so Matt, why don't you kick us off? And I think you are in the world of practice and training and so on and so forth. So why don't you give us a little context about like why you thought it was so important to build an entire organization or entire company and platform around this?
It's great jumping off point. I think it first starts with my own personal experience, where I very quickly in my sales career came to realize that I am incredibly mediocre with my native abilities, my natural skills, because I used to work in every team alongside people that could just jump in and go. And immediately they were rocket star, President's Club level salespeople from day one. And that was not me. Every stop I had, it was always a slow start, a grind where I had to figure things out, work really hard, but then eventually I'd be sitting on the beach next to those same rock stars at President's Club. So that was the first thing that was interesting to me about my own personal journey. And it happened in a number of different companies with a number of different types of sale, B2B and B2C. So it was very different models, but this pattern that seemed to come up, which sucked in the beginning, to be honest, each
Yeah.
time, knowing that it was going to be a grind. But on the other side of it, gave me a lot of reassurance in terms of being able to control my own destiny. And then fast forward to my 8 years at Rock Content, where I was leading a team that started with just 5 sales reps and me. And we eventually grew that to a go to market team of 120, about 60 on the sales side, another
Uh-huh.
60 on CS and account management. And understanding that hiring A players is obviously what we want to do. Those reps I mentioned that come in and just crush it right out of the gate. Most of the most successful teams I've seen are made up of B players. And
Yep.
then the C players you try to coach up or coach out,
Yep.
right? And with those B players, that was my story. It was jumping in as a B player who grinded it out to eventually get to an A player. So it put me in a pretty unique position where because I had lived it and sales didn't come naturally, I was able to apply a lot of what I had learned to scaling up that team quite successfully and getting to the point where we went from 500,000 in ARR to 30 million in ARR, largely with an immature, inexperienced team that we would hire in and then
Yep.
train and coach and really build those sales skills. that's the 3-minute overview here as to how we got to this point.
I love that because I don't have too dissimilar of a experience to you, right? We talked on the last podcast about my imposter syndrome when I joined HubSpot, and I looked around and I was like, these guys have more experience selling. They're coming in, they're top players as it is. And I just had to work harder, longer, and I learned in a different way than what these guys did. Now, one of the things that I also see is a lot of organizations out there might not have the ability to hire or attract top A talent, right? So it's how do you build a system that takes C talent like myself, B talent like yourself, and gets them to an A player or things along those lines. I think that's why it's so important to implement this ability to train and scale and grow an individual through practice. So love it. Absolutely love it.
Quick story and then a question. One of my favorite stories about Doyen is when we were building the LATAM team. I think we had one Spanish speaking rep at the time. And Doyen's
Right.
like, I speak Spanish, kind of. And you ran the team.
Yeah, so the other thing that mixes in to this whole mediocrity that grinds it out and works hard is this overconfidence that I'm going to figure it out. I'm an optimist by nature and a pessimist in the short term. So long term, I always think I'm going to figure this out. It's all going to be fine, and I'm going to get to President's Club, or we're going to grow the team. We're going to make it happen. Short term, I think I sound a bit more like you, Brian, where it's, you know what, everything is going to break, nothing's going to go right,
Yeah.
deals are going to get lost. This thing that, you know, the customer that's talking to me now that looks like they're going to buy, something's going to go sideways. And I think that blend served me well, where I could jump into a situation like that where it's like, yeah, I speak Spanish, kinda.
Yeah.
Most of the business was coming from Brazil, which is
Right.
Portuguese.
Did not speak Portuguese.
Yeah, and it's like, no, we're going to figure this
Yeah.
out. And then using a lot of this positive pessimism, short-term pessimism of, okay, given that everything is going to go wrong today, how can I take action to prevent it or minimize it or ameliorate whatever we could do to get to the next level?
Yeah. One thing Roberge used to say that kind of the term he used was a paranoid optimist, right? Like you always want to think things are going to work out, but you're paranoid as hell about it.
Yeah.
To my question, Doyen, when you were leading a team, what are some of the things you put into place, right, to really build that learning culture?
So the first thing that has to happen is expectation setting for how the rules of engagement are going to be as somebody is working throughout their journey on the team. And that has to happen. And I learned this the hard way. It really has to happen before they even sign the offer letter.
Yeah.
It should be, hey, I'm going to meet with you one last time as the hiring manager. We're going to make you the offer. Here's what it is. Know that this is what you're signing up for. You are coming into an organization that runs the sales organization like a professional sports team, where no matter how much experience you have and all your accomplishments before, you're expected to constantly focus on your skills, develop, get sharper, realize that skills are perishable. And what you might be great at one day, you can suck at tomorrow. And have what you just described as that positive paranoia
Yeah.
of being skeptical that past performance is going to dictate future results. Stay on that cutting edge, stay humble, stay hungry. Has to start there. And then from that point, once they agree and sign off and you've got them bought into that methodology, now as a
Yeah.
sales leader, you have to deliver on the promise. And
Yeah.
that means providing great training, great coaching, measuring whatever you could possibly measure. So the subjectivity of their effort and of their performance has just been pulled out of the equation. And you're measuring the input of their effort and you're measuring the output of their results together as closely as you can. And really using data as your best friend in that journey to identify what does this person need to work on, when do they need to work on it, and then providing the how stuff as they go through. And we could talk for the next hour on the how stuff and how it all breaks down to different formats and different ways of learning and practice and coaching and training.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joy, we talked on the last podcast about hiring and finding culture fit, but also hiring for like growth mindset and the individual, and then having a system that you train into as it relates to skills and so on and so forth. I think one thing that you mentioned is that expectation setting. There's so many times where we see a new rep gets in and they're like, you sold me one thing, And I'm getting something completely different here. It's not only the expectations, but it's also with coaching of the enrollment. Okay, are you open to learning, coaching, and being able to get that feedback and then following through on it? I think it's a really interesting idea of essentially what we build with the sales operating system. And then you take it to the next level of going individual on specific skills and how to go about developing that.
I love the fact that you set that expectation in the interview process. This sales team is run like a sports team. There's going to be practice. There is going to be, whether it's role plays, film sessions, and like you have to be bought into that to be part of the team.
And this is an evolution. And just like every other role, as I mentioned before, I started really mediocre, and through grinding and learning and understanding my mistakes and coming back at them, figured out what works better. I made in my early days as a sales leader, well before Triple Session, well before HubSpot, my early days as a sales leader, I made a lot of the common mistakes I see a lot of new sales leaders make. One of them being when you hire somebody, forging a really positive relationship or trying too early of, hey, you're perfect fit, you're ready for it, you're going to crush it, because they want to start with optimism and excitement and keep that energy going. And what happens is it overpromises and underdelivers, and you set yourself up for a role that is all too often much, much more difficult than what anybody initially intended it to be. So what the best thing to do is flip it around. I'm going to make it sound like it's going to be so much more work, so much harder than you could expect. I'm going to lower your expectation. I am going to raise your expectation on how much of a grind and how much work and how much we're going to expect from you. And then when reality sets in, hopefully the sales come easier than we first expected.
Yeah.
And the work that we're asking you to do is not as grueling. It's not as hard on you. It's something that is fun and working through.
Yeah.
Again, something that I think experienced leaders learn over time, and it took me some time to get there.
Yeah. Some of the biggest mistakes, and I made it, I see a lot of young managers make it, is in the interview process. So yeah, you have to sell a little bit, but overselling a candidate is the worst thing you could do for them and for the organization, right? It's like, you're going to get a ton of inbound leads. You're going to knock it out of the park. I expect you to make an MP club. Within 2 weeks, they're like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
what you said isn't real. 99% of the time, that's the case. It just sets the whole relationship off on a really bad foot. And I see a lot of new managers make that mistake. It's just like selling. Don't beg for the deal. Play a little hard to get.
Matt, what I'm hearing you say is almost try and sell them out of the deal. Like, hey, you don't want, this is going to be too much work for you. And you want the person who's going to be like, dude, I can do this.
It's like selling SaaS, right? Where you want to sell a bad deal because you might get it in, but it's going to churn and it's going to be worse for you in the long term than had you never sold it at all.
Mhm.
The opportunity cost is worse. So figure that out early as much as you possibly can. One part of our hiring process eventually was the reverse interview. You come in, you sit with a rep, you see what it's like, and you ask the rep questions. Like, we're going to step out of it and grill the rep on what the day-to-day is. We want you to know what reality is as much as possible. That's as close to a POC as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
In the SaaS world, that's what it is. Hey, let's run a POC, and you could see what this is like before you buy it.
So we're talking about hiring, getting the right person in there still, but let's talk a little bit about setting up an environment for like training. So like going through the onboarding process, and then how do we make sure they continue to refine those skills? What we see all the time in organizations that we speak with and we work with is there's nothing set up to give them an environment to continue to fail in, right? To continue to try it and get their talk tracks down. They do it on a call, and then maybe 10% of them are actually reviewing and listening to calls there. One, I think it starts with top down of making sure we create an environment that builds that practice arena, if you will. And I'll give an example. Like when I was the trainer at HubSpot, we used TAPA, right? The first thing we do is we teach the theory of what this thing is. Let's call it the discovery call. Why do we do it? Why is it important? Then it's the application of what does our discovery call look like? What's the framework? What are the questions we ask? And then the P is practice. Go practice it, right? Sit down with your manager, listen to calls, talk about it, and then assess how you did on that, right? Now you're running a mock call, you have a scorecard, and you're actually in a scrimmage before you get into games. So when you think of triple session and what you set up, tell me a little bit about micro learnings and kind of what you're doing there and how that can kind of get implemented on a day-to-day basis, if that's a good transition, or take us in a different way.
Yeah. So I think the best analogy to really bring it home is looking at sports teams. And we use a lot of analogies in sales that relate to sports. We're full of them at Triple Session because a lot of what we built just mirrors a lot of what we've learned from how great professional sports teams run. And you're talking about it. The first thing is having a playbook. If
Mm,
you're going to run a professional sports team, every play is diagrammed, it's explained, it's on demand. There's nothing that's left to chance in terms of uploading the information in somebody's brain. That's the
yep.
theoretical stuff you just mentioned. It's incumbent upon leadership to make sure they've done that work with and for their team to provide that playbook because that's the standard. That is what excellence looks like. That's when everyone does their job. This is the outcome. That's what we're shooting for.
I love that you said it's the organization's job to provide that to the sales team. It's not vice versa. We see that
Because
too often.
everything we talk a lot about expectation setting. What is my expectation as a salesperson on your team for
Yep.
what I need to do? And don't just tell me hit this number. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the goal. What are the plays they're going to score the touchdown, score the goals along the way? You need to really break it down one plays at a time and tell me what the standard of excellence is for putting one foot in front of the other. So that's
Yeah.
job
This
one,
could look like.
that theoretical stuff. Two is uploading it in the brain. You gave some great examples there. People have different learning styles, and what we've come to learn Triple Session, we take a lot of cues from where a lot of the most cutting edge apps are today. If you look at foreign language, all of us go and try to learn a foreign language in high school. None of us speak a foreign language when we graduate high school. So that's kind of broken, and we have to understand why.
Yeah.
Sitting down and being dictated to on a foreign language and learning something in a classroom style setting, it just does not shape the mind, or does only for a very few subset of people that are really truly engaged and they're doing the work on their own. For most of us, we just don't retain it. It doesn't change the way we think. You have to interact with content and with training in order to really upload it. And what we've
Mm,
learned from great apps like Duolingo is it has to be small, it has to be repeated on a regular basis, and really connected to your reality of what you're
Yep.
doing in the day to day immersion. And it has to be for sales, it has to be measured. You have to
mhm.
really see what you know and what you don't at any point. So we didn't really invent anything at Triple Session. We're just pulling apart the different components of what has worked elsewhere and we're sticking them into a go-to-market context. So
Yeah.
playbooks work in sports. We're going to use playbook type methodology.
Mhm.
On demand, micro learning with an app that gamifies the experience, that helps to learn a foreign language. We're going to use that best practice to teach the language of sales skill building. And then finally, you mentioned post-game analysis and plays and reviews. So this is again going back to the sports world. They unfortunately are limited to looking at the full game tape. We don't have that same restriction. We don't have to wait till a full game expires before we can go back. We can actually sit down and look at every single play immediately, analyze, learn from it, and adjust on the next play. So imagine an NFL team could pause time and do a play-by-play review with the entire team and then unpause time and play the game that way. They'd be the Super Bowl champions every year because they're making adjustments based on every play. Great teams do this at halftime. They make adjustments and they go, and their second half is always better.
Yeah.
In sales, we can make the adjustments and learn from every single call now. AI has allowed us to do that, to get a game tape review immediately after a call to say, what did I miss on this? Before I even send a summary email right after the call, I can know what went well, what did I miss, what do I have to go capture, and what do I need to learn to do better on the next call? And I can do that in 10 minutes.
Yep.
It's fantastic what we were able to do today.
That's
Yeah.
really
I
cool.
think,
I did have a quick question, Matt. You mentioned earlier that it's the organization's responsibility to have those playbooks, right? You can't just say to somebody, hit the phones, hit a number.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a lot of organizations I've worked with or worked for, with few exceptions, that's how they operate. Oh, you've got a good track record, go figure it out. And a very small percentage of those reps are going to be successful. How often are you seeing organizations not having those playbooks or not having that example of excellence? Is that still something you see quite a bit of?
To its fullest extent, the most developed, mature style of playbook that's there, less than 5% of the time.
Yeah.
I'd say 1 in 20, I'll see something that's like, wow, you really did the work you need to do to have something that's clear, documented, easy to find, ready to go. You onboard everyone with it, and then you make it easy to go find that stuff later.
Wow.
Most of it is just stuff that lives inside somebody's head, and they'll try to teach it in live meetings or coach on it, and that's it, and it's not there.
Yeah. And then those are the same companies where the sales manager or even the founder is like, sales reps are the worst. I don't understand why they can't sell. It's like, you got to look at that mirror, man. Have you set them up for success?
Yeah, and for me as a sales leader, I when I hired somebody, we did a lot of work in vetting talent. But when I hired them, I wanted to make sure I delivered on my promise.
Yeah.
And if I was going to fire somebody for not performing, I want to make sure I did everything I possibly could so I could sleep well at night and go
Yep.
into that conversation having no doubts, no hesitation, no reservations that am I making the right decision or the wrong decision? I want that to be a really simple conversation. We have done this and this and this and this and this like we do for everyone else. Almost everybody else makes it. You didn't. It's just a bad fit.
Yeah.
Good luck, and I hope you do well somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I think it's like organization's responsibility is set up. What we call at Monarch is like what good looks like, right? How many activities should you do that gets X amount of deals, that does Y number of deals? What does each call and conversation look like? How do you have your playbooks? What are our expectations of you on as a sales rep, so you know what good looks like? And then this is why I'm so excited about our recent partnership is then you take it down to the next level. Now we have individual coaching metrics that we can help scale this one person based off their live calls, based off all of the stuff, and then provide real-time training based off that feedback. Another thing that I want to circle back on that you mentioned is the micro training. What we've seen is organizations tend to grow sales in two different ways. They hire, increase like headcount, or they have a sales training organization come in, run something for a week, and then it kind of fades out. Nothing ever changes. The one-off, like large trainings, that's like going to the gym once every month for a year, rather than implementing these micro trainings, lifting, smaller weights until you progress to a larger weight there. What's your recommendation? Is a sales rep, should they be doing this on a daily basis? What's a training cadence for a sales rep that you would recommend from Triple Session?
The best results that we've seen, and best part of my business now is that I have tons of data. So it's not just gut feel that we can base this on now. We have the stats to report on this. The top performing reps will not train a ton on any one day. They'll do it consistently and bake it into their process once a day, usually at the beginning. They will start their day training on something that they learned from a scorecard, an automated scorecard that they missed the day before.
Yeah.
And if you're working in sales in any capacity, you're going to have a slew of stuff that you're missing all the time. And we know this because we coach reps, we look at pipeline, we look at deals, and even the most experienced reps, they're missing stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So there's always stuff to dial in and tweak on because there are 100 things that we have to be great at all the time. And we never keep 100 knives sharp at all the time. So we got to keep going back to that. So the best in class will have not a lot of training by hours. They actually don't train as much as mediocre reps because the mediocre reps will jump in and do 5 or 10 micro sessions at a time and blow out their numbers, and they'll do it once a week maybe.
Yeah.
That doesn't stick nearly as much as I'm going to wake up my brain here in the morning before I get into the game. I'm going to loosen up and warm it up with something that I need to get better at, and then I'm done for the day. Now I'm working.
Yeah.
And they do it about 10 or 15 minutes. That's it. Because it's hyper focused, it's short, it's small, it sticks, and then they're going to come back to something else. And the repetitiveness is what builds that out. So you use the analogy of going to the gym. I am flush with analogies as well.
Yep.
The one I like there is brushing your teeth. You can brush for 20 minutes once a week if you want, and then not for the other 6 days. Not that great. Or you could brush for a couple of minutes every day. And I think it's pretty clear as to what makes the most sense. You're actually brushing less total time, but because you're spacing it out, it keeps you healthier. It's the same thing with what we do. And we're just now realizing this, and a lot of it comes from academia and the studies they do and A/B testing, old school learning with this new format, and just what people retain and can pull down from their brains later. So it's just now proven on. We don't have to guess anymore. We have the data on it. It's just the right way to do it.
I love the fact that you're seeing the results from folks who are taking like a half hour, 15 minutes to 30 minutes every morning, because they can now take that practice and apply it throughout the day. So
Right.
throughout the day, they're getting better, better, and better. And then the next day, it's a new skill. And then apply it, apply it, apply it. That's really cool.
So much of our job is the preparation that we do before we get into a
Yeah.
conversation, right? Are we going to wing it or are we actually going to do our homework? And that's at every phase. At the, you're making a cold call, you have an inbound connect call. What kind of homework are you doing to get your head straight on that? Running discovery, we all know what the differences are like when we actually do homework before discovery or not. Demo, that's the classic case. The way you demo a product or deliver a presentation, that all depends on how prepared you are.
Yeah.
And then going into a closing call, if that's part of the process, are you prepared for this thing to go sideways? Are you ready for any curveballs that are going to be thrown at you? Because that's the job. It's not, hey, send the contract. It's how am I going to respond when somebody throws something at me that's other than that? And there could be 22 things that are other than that.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I have a closing call on Monday, and they added 3 new people to the call. So probably not a closing
Yeah.
call, right? But it's like, okay, how do I, Thorne, get with you and say, okay, how do we handle it if this, what's the agenda that's different here? And actually build the playbook for the call, ahead of the call. Not enough organizations then say, okay, let's practice it together. The way I learn is I'll jump on and I'll say, Matt, I'm going to run this soft close on you. And then you give me feedback and then I run it again. And then I run it again. And I just keep running this before I actually go do it on the call. And then I feel more confident. It comes across better. One of the sports analogies that I love is like Steph Curry's, the amount of shots that he takes in the game is 5% of the amount of shots that he takes altogether. Most of his shots are all done in practice. And then you're only seeing this small portion. I don't know how those two things tie together exactly, but I think it was a nice parlay into a Steph Curry.
I had a rep last job I was at, former HubSpot. She's awesome. Before every single call, she was like, hey, I'm putting 20 minutes on your calendar. I want to practice. Like, throw every objection at me. And you get on that call, man, there was not an objection she could not overcome. Because it was her. Hey, I need you to help me practice I'm like, Amanda, you've got this. And she's like, nope, I need to practice. Not surprised that she was P Club top rep, right?
Right.
She took ownership of, if someone's not going to put time on my calendar to make me practice, I'm going to be proactive and do it with my manager. That's the sign of a great rep.
Right. And to your point, the information is in there. It's all been uploaded already. The difference is that the mediocre reps will be complacent that I've already studied it, I've already learned it, I don't need to do any more work. And that is not, knowing something is not being the same as readiness. And that's the difference. Yep, you've studied it, you've read it, you've done it before, but are you ready for the moment? And that's what she was doing. She was getting that information to the surface, so she was ready to handle it.
Yeah.
It all was in there. You probably didn't share any new information in that. You just surfaced the stuff that she already knew.
Warmed it up. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you go back, since we're throwing out sports analogies, you go back to the Patriots dynasty, right? They always said we were so good because the toughest defense we were ever going to play was our own defense. So for the 3 days a week when we're practicing, we're getting our ass kicked by the defense. Come game day, it's going to be easier than what we experienced during the week. And I think that's important too, whether it's role play or film sessions, make it hard. So by the time a rep gets on a call, oh, that was easy.
Yeah. So to that point, one of my favorite documentaries is the Do Your Job one, the one after the Seattle New England Super Bowl, where at the end of that documentary, they talk about Malcolm Butler. They show the practice film of him blowing the play and going around and missing it and them scoring the touchdown in practice. And then they overlay that with, he got burnt on that right before it was game time. And he saw that same play and didn't get burnt on, and then he was the hero.
Yeah.
Had that practice not happened, no chance that entire scenario changes.
Yeah.
So it's as clear as day as far as what the idea of practice can do in playing the game in sales.
Very cool.
All right, so quick recap is one is when you're thinking about hiring, if your company might not attract A talent, right? You need to set up a system that one helps C, B, D talent, whatever it might be, get to this ability to grow and scale within that. And in the interview process, try and say, hey, this is going to be hard. And you want to find people who aren't afraid of hard. Organization's responsibility to set up what good looks like and then build out these micro learnings that happen on a small daily basis, like you're brushing your teeth, and then continue to measure and grow that. We haven't talked about the measuring aspect though. How are you thinking about measuring sales training or skill development as you guys kind of build out triple session there?
So AI has changed the game as far as what we're able to measure throughout the process. So when we look at what top tier teams will measure, most top tier teams today, they see every stage of their process. They're measuring the conversion rates and sales cycle and performance on an individual and team level. And that's good, but it's not perfect. And it's not perfect in the sense of if you see somebody that has a low demo to close conversion, what does that tell you? It's great that you're measuring it, but what does that tell you about where they need to develop their game? Are they poor at running a demo? Well, maybe. Do they run superficial, insufficient discovery and they're bringing not a lot of great stuff to demo?
Pushing everyone through the funnel. Yeah.
Usually what I see, that's where it is. And discovery by itself has so many different components to it, and it's an ongoing process. So what did you miss that resulted in that bad demo? Are you, failing at the very beginning? You're just bringing bad fits in and you're investing way too much time in stuff that you should have cleared out earlier and disqualified. It could be any one of those things. And without knowing the input measures, both quantitatively and qualitatively, you're just feeling around guessing. And again, most top level teams will do that today, and they'll feel around and guess through one-on-one coaching. Hey, tell me about your deals. What are you working on? I'm going to listen to some calls that are recorded and score and try to find where the gaps are. Now with AI, we could take that standard of excellence in a scorecard, run it through AI on every single call, and then have an output of what did you score overall on this call? And then what are all of the elements that we could see that make up that excellence that you got well or missed or partially got? And then really pull it apart on a call by call basis. And because we're doing it at scale in mass, now we can start to see where those patterns emerge on, hey, you always nail this. You should train the rest of the team on how you do it so we can learn from you. Or you're missing this piece consistently on every call. This is where we have to spend our time. And the data is now telling us it's not what we feel needs to be done from a live coaching. It's the robot overlords that are now governing all sales processes, which is AI, is now telling us this rep is missing this piece on this sales component every time. They got to go back to the lab and work on it.
It'll break down all the different components of a discovery call, all the different components of a demo, and then maybe say, hey, you're really good at the initial part of discovery, right? But when it comes to tying your value to their pain points, you're missing out.
Yeah. So one of our most common scorecards that clients are using right now is a discovery process that has the spiced methodology embedded in it. And part of spiced is impact. So you've identified a problem or a need, and now you're really understanding, you're drilling into understanding, what are the dollar amounts that are causing impact? How many people are affected by that? What happens if this doesn't change, and the ripple effects that will come from this if you don't fix this? Reps really struggle with that. And we see that coming out in the data. So we know right where to send them individually and their leadership team to working on upping their game, because it's all coming out now from their actual performance. So now we know where they need to practice, and we could give that to them immediately so they could save the deals that they missed out on right away before they got off the rails, and they can correct on the next calls that they're working on super fast.
That's awesome.
In our sales operating system, it shows conversion rates from stage to stage, and it gives the manager a way to say, okay, how do I understand where to coach this person? And rule number one of sales management and coaching is focus on one specific thing at a time. Get that one thing down before you move to the next one. And then taking it down to the triple session AI aspect, you know the exact one that you should be doing throughout this sales process with this specific rep, right? We'll build out like a coaching plan for them that's now enabled by data to a second degree. When we were talking about a partnership, I was like, man, this just works so nicely into helping organizations, one, create their way of going to market, understanding what good looks like, and then getting the sales development and skill training to a perfection.
Yeah, and we're in a fun time right now with AI
Mhm.
because it's buying a flat screen TV in the
Mhm.
sense where
We got
which
another
would
analogy.
you rather buy? A flat screen TV from 10 years ago where you would have spent $1,000 to get something that at the time was amazing,
Hmm.
or a TV today which is 5 times better for a fifth the price. And that's
Yep.
where we get to come in because AI has been around for a while, but legacy AI offers are expensive and they're not as good. And they
Mm.
can't do what Toshiba and the other companies do, which is just put out a new product and lower the price. They're kind of stuck with being expensive and not as good. And we could come in and now we have a better flat screen at a fifth the cost.
Yep.
So now we can service a huge market and deliver a better product at a fraction of the price. It's great. It's a great time to be working in an AI driven sales organization.
Yeah, especially in the niche that you're in with enablement. 2024, 2025 is the year of enablement, right? Everyone's focused on productivity per rep. It's no
Efficiency.
longer, yeah, efficiency. It's
Yeah.
no longer growth at all costs, right? It's how do we get the people that we have on the team more effective, more efficient, and we can use new tools at our disposal to do that at a fraction of the price that it used to cost.
It's actually the decade of efficiency.
Hmm.
Do we have 2 minutes to go down a rabbit hole here?
Oh, let's go.
So I did a couple keynotes at the beginning of the year for sales kickoffs, and all of it was you're entering into a new era of sales, which is going to be efficiency for the next 10 years.
Hmm.
And the whole idea was to really scare the shit out of salespeople that were in the room, that the reality that they've come to know has fundamentally changed.
Yep.
And why do I know it's 10 years? I've pulled together information from RepView, Crunchbase, demographic information. What's driving this change is cost of capital.
Yeah.
Investments are slowly, not fizzling out, but they're coming down enough, and the cost of capital is coming up. It's not going to change for 10 years, mostly because of demography. Baby boomers, the largest population in US history, that was pumping tons of money into all types of investments and kept the cost of capital low. That's what we got 2.5% mortgages. That's what created the subprime crisis. That's what created Enron 20 years ago. That's created all this bad shit that happened. Now, cost of capital is coming up, which seems ridiculous for us, but it's kind of coming back to what used to be normal, which means that there's just going to be less volume and we just have to do more than we ever did
Yeah.
before. And we got this weird shock during COVID where it really got crazy, especially in software and technology, where so much volume that efficiency got thrown out the window. But now we're getting into this, and it's going to last until the next big generation, which are millennials, replace all the funding because my generation, Gen X, we're the smallest generation there ever was. There aren't enough of us to fund the capital market in our 50s and 60s to make up the gap. So the cost of capital is going to be high. It's going to stay high for another decade. And we're just going to have to get used to doing more with fewer people. So the new model is a smaller team, not a lot smaller, but smaller team by rep head count, and actually more money in ops and enablement
Mm.
because to make sure that that smaller column that we have is producing at a higher volume and higher conversion and average conversion rates.
Yeah. It's a point, though, and I think what you're saying too is you have to be a good rep to be successful. Right. I think we've all experienced average reps making $300,000 a year. Today, you have to be a skilled rep. And if you're not learning and practicing and getting better every day, you're going to be out the door.
Yeah, the tolerance is going to be a lot less for the bottom 20%.
Yeah.
I actually expect the top 20% to make more than they made previously because there are fewer low ball players that are
Yeah.
sucking up their leads and
Yeah.
opportunities. And then the middle grade reps, they're going to have to just grind it out more than they ever did before. It's going
Yeah.
to be harder for them.
Yeah.
But it's also a perfect storm of cost of capital is rising, but the AI that we're talking about is coming at the right time to help with that efficiency
Yep.
for the organizations who aren't scared of it, but are willing to adapt it and be like, I realize that I have to change in order to adapt to the next decade of what's coming, and I can't do what I used to do, last year.
Yeah, I call it revenue pruning, where we're going to cut off 20% of the low-hanging players, the low performers, and we're
Yep.
going to use what's remaining to enrich the rest of the team that's there. That's why there's incremental gains in ops and enablement, because the rest of the team that's here, we're going to give you all the data you need. We're going to give you all the training and coaching and support you need. We're going to make sure you have what you need to succeed. And we expect you to not only make up the gap that we lost from getting rid of 20% of headcount on the sales rep side, but actually do even more than that. So that's the new model for sales teams to operate in.
Yeah, it's topical, Bride, for some of the internal conversations we have. Matt, we're in an interesting position with a lot of clients where we become your outsourced sales, strategist, operations, enablement, where we set up a system that allows you to understand who the underperformers are. At times have to make the recommendation to say, hey, based off what we're seeing, right, this is where you guys should go as it relates to pruning your sales org and growing it most effectively as we build out this hiring profile to make sure we get the right individuals in and really start becoming more efficient and effective as you scale.
I had this conversation last week. It was a sales team of 50 reps, 10 managers, directors, VPs. Like, we don't have anything in the budget this year to add anything. It's like, great, you don't need to. You have a team of 50. Do you know who your worst rep is? Well, I
Yeah.
have an idea. Great. We're going to quantify it for you so you know with the data who that is. And you're going to fire them and not replace them to get what we offer for the other 49. So they
Mhm.
sell way more than that one failing rep ever could. And you've actually saved money to empower the other 49 people to sell more.
Yeah.
How does that sound? And less in sales to sell more. That's what it is. This is the transition into efficiency.
Yeah. Did you close the deal, Matt?
Close the deal.
They fired him. You took the money.
Haven't fired yet, but we've already
The point was
circled
made. Yeah.
in that they shouldn't buy any green bananas for the office.
Yeah.
And I also think there's this idea of making sure, like, it's not that we want to fire people, but to be honest with you, when you're at the bottom of the waterfall all the time, you're probably just as unhappy in your sales seat as the sales organization is with you. So it's almost like just a shifting of talent into a better fit for everyone involved.
No, nobody wants to be at the bottom of the chart. They're miserable. They're not confident. They're probably looking. It is the best thing for everybody.
Yep.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive because it's delivering somebody bad news, but we actually should want to fire people because we're not infallible. We do hire people that aren't great fits, or people just lose their mojo and they need to move on, and ripping the Band-Aid off is better for them and for the company.
To have a decision like that that's data driven gives it a much more effective way to understand it, present that information, and move forward. Where a lot of organizations that we're speaking with or we talk with, they just don't have that set up in order to provide the.
It goes back to what Matt said earlier. Have you done everything you can do? Have you set them up for success? If you haven't, it's on you. If you have, then parting ways is the best thing for both parties, and both parties should be able to sleep at night.
And if you haven't, you have to realize how expensive that is for your business. You spend money hiring people, you spend money every month keeping them on the payroll and underperforming. You spend leads on them that you also paid for, but then there's the opportunity cost where if you've done your job, they would have converted those leads to revenue and you didn't do your job. And then it drags down morale of the team, it drags down everybody. I mean, there are huge costs at so many different areas if you don't do this work up front.
Yeah.
Right. It's our conversation the other day of the team is going to feel so relieved by setting an expectation of, hey, we demand excellence on this team. We just can't let people who sitting around not pulling their weight stay here. And then, or else the top performers are going to be like,
well, it's what Matt said earlier too. If you set the expectation in the hiring process that this is a team that has a growth mindset, we're building something special, this is going to be hard work, and then they show up and it's none of these guys are doing what you said you're going to require, your credibility is out the door.
Is perfect and ties into how you should set up this sales organization. Because as we look and have conversations, it's hard to set this up. We talked about it earlier of, hey, how many people have that scorecard, right? It's 5%. The first scorecard you develop doesn't have to be the perfect scorecard. Get a scorecard, start evolving it, get out there. But there's too many organizations who, and I'd be curious your guys' thought of like why it's not set up this way. Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of understanding? Is it a lack of know-how?
I'll go first. If we understand what's the source of the problem, the source of the problem is that sales leaders come from sales reps, and sales reps come from people that aren't necessarily excited about structure and process and documentation
Yeah.
and spreadsheets and like all of the nuts and bolts and engineering that needs to be done. If they were, they probably would have never gotten into sales to begin with. They'd be in finance, they'd be in ops, they'd be an engineer, they'd be a doctor, something else. So most of the people that get in sales to begin with like the in the moment stuff. They like to work
Hmm.
with people. Emotional intelligence. I want to be problem solving. I don't want to spend time in documentation. That drags me down. So they just don't do the work. And because it doesn't mesh with their personality too well, that's where the loss comes in. I think one of the advantages that we had coming from HubSpot is the guy that led the sales team was an engineer that was raised by a sales coach. And it was this weird mix of, okay, this guy gets it. He's a really good sales guy, but comes at it with an engineering mindset. So understands all of the structural stuff that needs to be done to really make a system run. And that blend is really what's needed, and it's rare.
Yeah. I think similar to what I've seen in organizations I've gone to post HubSpot, they just don't know. It's like, hey, we should put together a hiring scorecard, right? So we're grading all these candidates the same way. It's like, oh, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. They just never heard of it. I do think and most people after they leave HubSpot realize it, how spoiled they were when they were there. And we talked about this on our first podcast. It was because of Robert, right? He wasn't your typical sales guy like the three of us, right? He was graduate from MIT Sloan School. He was an engineer. He took that approach to sales, which was really, really unique. Before I went to HubSpot, I was winging everything and loving it. It was a big adjustment for me to be like, oh, I have to look at these numbers and analyze these numbers. And then as I became a sales leader, you just take that with you. But I think a lot of organizations aren't fortunate enough to have somebody who came from a HubSpot or even an Oracle or a Salesforce who are very scientific about how they sell.
And I think a lot of it is taking out the subjectivity and moving it to objectivity to actually score this with data and be able to build this. We work with a lot of like manufacturing industries that their back end is Six Sigma, lean, efficient. And then you turn over to sales, everyone's running a different sales process. They don't take the same principles that you do in software development and product or manufacturing and apply it to the sales organization. To your point of like maybe having someone who doesn't grow up in the sales org come in and say, let's look at this like a different part of the organization and run it that way.
Those organizations expect like, hey, these are salespeople. They're charismatic. They should be able to sell deals. No, that doesn't work anymore. Just like your back end, I mean, they have process, structure, scorecards, performance reviews, all of that. Sales is now much more, and I think you said this, Dwayne, much more like operations or engineering. The good teams, not just 30 people winging it on the phone.
Right. And the worst thing that happens is people hire A players, and that gives them a false sense of security that I don't have to set this up. I do have some people that just come in and naturally do it, which is great. You're not going to hire a full team of A players. Nobody ever does. It's not possible at scale. So because of that, your job becomes getting B's and C's and coaching them up to get to A's.
Yep. Well, that's a big thing that we see across the board is you've gotten to a certain point and you've plateaued because you've hired some A players, but you don't have systems in place to create more of a data-driven approach to sales. That's awesome, Matt. It was awesome having you on the podcast and talking a little bit about practice and what you guys are doing at Triple Session over there. So thank you.
Be here.
So before we go over, Matt, I'll give you a second to tell them where they can find you, but go over to Triple Session, pick up the Revenue Revolution if you haven't already.
I live on LinkedIn. I think I'm probably the only Matt Doyon, Doyon, that you're going to find out there. So follow me, add me, constantly in there, posting, publishing stuff. And then if you want to check out what we're doing, we are product led. So you can get in and use 80% of our product absolutely free, triplesession.com.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.